Hey, it's Matty Trump at mixandmastermysong.com. I had some requests to go over the signal flow in my studio and kind of how I run things. So I decided what I do is do a quick studio tour and do the signal flow of the kind of analog parts I use when I'm mixing and mastering. So what we'll do is let's go through the different racks I got, and I can show you what I use and how I use them, and hopefully we'll help you guys at home who might have some questions on using analog mix bus processing and stuff like that. So let's jump in. So when I first built this studio, my main goal was to hear the music as pure and real as possible. So when I was making edits to mixing and mastering, it was true and it was translates outside and all that. So the emphasis I put on was the monitoring section. And besides this room, which is a big part of this, making it all sound right with all the bass traps and trapping we have here, as you can see in some of our photos, was to get the best speakers. So we went with the Barefoot MM45s as our main monitors, and then I've had these Yamaha NS10s for years and been using them forever, so I just know them so well, and that's why I still keep them. All the speakers go through this Cranesong Avocet 2A. This thing is amazing D to A converter that just makes things sound as clear and true as possible. And it's got my separate outs here so I can switch the speakers. And then I have this button, which you can see I got some tape here for my reference mixes when a client sends their reference. And then we have iTunes here as well when I want to reference something from iTunes. And then we have the DAW, the main DAW, which is our digital out from the Symphony I/O. So everything comes right up on here, and we got a sub too that we could switch on and off up there. There's also mono and dim and mute and all that. So this thing's amazing for being the central unit to kind of control the whole studio. Moving on from that is the I/O we use, which is the new Symphony I/O MK2. It's 16 ins and 16 outs. And I have this because I use a good amount of analog gear on the master bus for mixing and for mastering. And then I also have this Avalon AD 2044, which I use more for kick, snare, and bass and vocals, kind of like what I like to consider the most important things in the mix. And this kind of gives me this punch and warmth that I can't always get from just digital. I like to have some analog components in my mix just to give that sound that I grew up on. And the difference to me between analog and digital isn't like what's better, it's what's the sound you're looking for. And I'm used to a certain sound from, all the records I hear and some of the engineers I look up to. They're all still pretty much using analog gear. So while I can't use all analog gear all the time just because the rate I have to do mixes, I do like to have some pieces that really make a difference. So this is one of them that I consider makes a difference. So let's move on to the next rack, and I can show you kind of the mastering chain. All right, so here's the other rack, and this is kind of my mastering chain. I do just mastering, and I also mix and master my own songs, which some people don't do. I've been doing it that way for years because I've done a lot of independent artists, and I've kind of learned how to mix into my mastering chain, and it works for me. I end up getting my records to sound the way I want them to sound, and I don't have to send them to mastering all the time. When budgets allow, I love to send them to a separate mastering engineer, but I don't really feel like I need to. So here's kind of how I run this thing. This is a Better Maker compressor. This I use more for maybe the drums, the DBX, or I sometimes use it on the master, but not too much. I'll use they have a nice mastering compressor on there, or what they call their mastering compressor, but they also have a DBX 160, which is great on drums, and so I use that for that quite a bit. So that's not usually in the mastering chain. But from out of Studio One or Pro Tools, whatever DAW we're using that day, it comes right into this BC2 TK Audio compressor, which is mastering grade. All the switches are indented, so it's easy to recall. And it's got a high-pass filter. It's got some thud, which is a little bit of harmonic distortion. And you can switch it between different transformers from Class A and not. And it's an awesome sounding compressor. I love it. From there, it goes into the Better Maker I don't even know what model this is, but this is their kind of their Pultec EQ, and I use that on the master chain. And then after that, it goes into this guy, which is Bax EQ, made by TK as well, and it just sounds awesome. I just add a little bit on the highs, just to give myself a little shine on my mixes and stuff. And it also helps, because I put this on before I even really start mixing the song. It helps me not have to EQ as much, because it's already kind of bright, my mix as it starts, and then I don't have to go individually and brighten things up. So it's kind of a nice way to start things out. All right, so that's pretty much it. But the last piece, and you might have seen this if you watched some of my other videos, is my Soft Tubes Console 1 and my Fader Port 8. And this is kind of like the centerpiece of what I do when I'm mixing, because mostly what I do is mix in the box, except for the analog stuff we talked about. This thing is my baby. I love this so much, and I now don't use that many plugins anymore, because I basically just use the SSL 9000 or the Neve with this, and I can do all my EQ. If I need a gate, I can grab a gate. If I need a transient designer, I can grab a transient designer. If I need compression, I need compression. And I can't wait for the UAD stuff to come out, because a lot of what I end up doing is have this, and then I have to put other plugins on. But since I use a lot of UAD stuff, I won't even have to. You'll be able to load them right into each module. And then it's got drive, and I mean, it's got everything I need, and I can switch tracks all through here. This thing is awesome. And then the fader port's another piece of it, and I do a lot of my automation and fader rides on here, and I can do pans. Really cool to do pan. When I switch to pan side, I do that for a lot of automating pans. All my automation I do more on here than over there. And you can edit plugins, tracks, hit play, get everything to go back to the start. So both of these let me kind of touch my mix more and give me more of that analog feel. And the most important part for this is that I hear the mix more than I see the mix, because I'm not a big fan of the plugins that you can see the frequency analyzer, and before you know it, you're looking at the mix, not listening to the mix, which is what we're doing. We're mixing music. So the less I have to look at the screen, the better, and that's the big reason I have these while I'm mixing. And then of course I got my Boston Red Sox buddies there too, and my UA Quad 8 for all my UA plugins. So I hope that helped you guys out if you were interested in just kind of how I run things, or you know, you're trying to figure out how to add some analog to your signal flow. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video, and hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com if you got any more questions. Thanks.